Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the newest episode of the Kingsmen Sports Podcast. I am Matthew King, got Jacob Sullivan starting things off. Tristen will be on a little bit later, talk some college football. Daniel will not be. Work stuff, school stuff just swamped him. So no Daniel this week. Also want to let you guys know that next week we won't have our normal full-length episode. It's just a busy time. We will have a MLB playoff special, a little short episode coming out on either Thursday or Friday next week. That will kind of give our predictions for the MLB postseason, since we'll know the official bracket with the season ending on Wednesday. So that is the how things are looking next week. But let's get into this week. Baseball season coming to a close, the regular season. Of course, playoffs right around the corner. Teams locking up their spots. And we're going to start with a team that we talked about last week, in that their division was still up for grabs. And then they just went on a rampage and they have locked up the AL Central. That is the Cleveland Guardians. Swept the White Sox, no problem, and just really rolled into winning that division. A team that not a lot of people thought were going to compete for the division. I said before the season started, I liked their pitching, just didn't think they had the bats to get to the playoffs. They've had some guys step up. This team looks like a team who could pull off an upset or two along the way in the postseason, and especially if they keep playing like they are, because right now they are red hot.
Yeah, and they're just fun to watch. A lot of young guys. I love that celebration that they were doing with the champagne and the pizza after they closed it all out. But I mean, Ramirez, Rosario, and Kwan are a good group to build a team around. And then that pitching. I mean, Bieber's looking dominant. Not as dominant as 2020 Cy Young Bieber, but he's getting the job done, just leading that rotation. And then Emmanuel Clase is just the best closer in the American League right now. That cutter is just unfair. I mean, he's like 5 miles an hour average higher than the next runner up as far as cut fastballs. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Mariano Rivera-esque. I mean, the closers that can use that cutter are filthy.
Yeah. And so they're riding high right now. 7-game win streak, just looking real hot. I mean, you said that they swept the White Sox and then they went and they swept the Rangers. So that they're looking good. Like you said, they could really turn up some surprises here in the postseason.
Yeah, and Kwan at the top of the lineup, you mentioned him. One of the hardest outs in baseball. Dude just doesn't swing and miss. He battles every single at bat. Then you have Jose Ramirez, who's just an RBI machine. And like you said, Rosario also right there in that lineup. He's having a fantastic year. And then you got Andres Jimenez at second. He's got a lot of speed towards the bottom of that lineup, but he's also got phenomenal defense. So that team can really do it all. And it's not just, of course, Bieber in the rotation. You got Tristan McKenzie having a career year. Cal Quantrill has been really consistent for them. Of course, they're missing some guys who punched the earth, as we mentioned in a previous episode. But they're set up for a tough out for whoever may face them in the postseason. They will play a wild card series, though, against the number 6 wild card, which would right now be the Seattle Mariners. We decided we were going to look at the 8 teams who are really wild card teams. They're teams that have a chance, if they're not actually in the wild card spot right now, have a legitimate chance to get in. So no, we didn't have like the Twins or the White Sox involved. Teams that have a legit shot or already hold one of those wild card spots. Of course, there's one wild card team who could still win their division, so they are still included here. Of course, we'll talk about them here in just a little bit, but we're going to rank the teams from the worst possible chance to make a run and get to the World Series to the team with the best chance to make a run to the World Series. Again, this will be from 8 to 1. Jacob, you want to kick things off for us?
Sure. Yeah, I have the Orioles as the least likely to make that World Series run. Honestly, they're going to be happy if they make that postseason. I don't see it happening. They're enjoying some really good streaks, but I still don't think that they're in that win now mode. They're just riding those highs and seeing what happens. Then I got the Padres, who are doing better, but they just hit slumps and they cannot get out of it. Still really lacking some necessary pieces. Then I got the Brewers, kind of fell off. Not sure how long they're going to stick around for this year. Then I got the Phillies, who, I mean, their saving grace is their pitching. I mean, just real lights out pitching, but they're kind of, I think, battling time as well. Just as soon as they hit one of those all-star caliber teams that they're going to, unless it's a division rival, they just don't seem to do good in those situations. Then I have the Rays, solid team, but injuries are just hitting them hard. And it's been all year and it just keeps getting worse and worse. I felt bad for them since July and they're just losing bigger pieces. Then I got the Mariners. When they're not playing scrub teams or the Astros, there's no one they can't beat. I mean, they will not be outclassed by those higher teams. So rising to the occasion, see what will happen. I do have them in the top half. Then I've got the Blue Jays. When they're on, they're on. Still top dog as far as wild card teams go, other than the Braves and the Mets. There's no question. I think that either of those teams can easily be seen going all the way. One of them will not even be a wild card team, and really it's a coin flip at this point. So that's my list.
So my list looks pretty different than yours. I have at number 8 with the worst chance, the Milwaukee Brewers. The team's just been inconsistent all year. They have good pitching at times, then they'll blow it. Their bullpen has not been good at all. The offense has been extremely up and down. Either they're hot or they are ice cold. I don't see them getting in. I think they miss the playoffs altogether. At 7, I have the Philadelphia Phillies. The pitching, when the pitching's good, the bats seem to struggle. When the pitching is in a little bit of a slump, the bats all of a sudden wake up.
Mariners.
You got to have some camaraderie there. I also don't love the depth of this lineup. I think, yeah, you got some absolute sluggers, the Rhys Hoskins. You got Bryce Harper. You got, of course, Kyle Schwarber. The bottom of that order, nothing to write home about. I've got them at 7. At 6, I have the Tampa Bay Rays. Again, you mentioned it. They are so beat up. They have so many injuries. They're trying to get guys back, but you got to have that in the back of your mind. Are they going to rush them back? Are any of them going to have relapse injuries? The offense right now is boom or bust, especially recently. It's like they're either putting up double figures or getting shut out. There's no in between. So I've got the Rays at 6. I've got the Baltimore Orioles at 5. They're stuck in a hole, obviously, 3.5 games out of a playoff spot. But again, you have the Mariners and the Rays who are only separated by half a game. So either of those teams slides here in the last week. The Orioles could definitely bump up. They are red hot right now. The question about Baltimore is, can the pitching hold up if they do get to the postseason? Can they compete with these teams that have much better rotations? The lineup right now, obviously, they're scoring plenty of runs, but it all comes down to that pitching staff. I'm not completely sold on them. At 4, I have the Mariners. Great pitching. Their pitching can be able to go toe-to-toe with anyone. They're 4 deep in the rotation that can go out there and win you a playoff game. Great bullpen for the most part. I know the road trip says otherwise. The bats are really struggling right now, just in a slump. Eugenio Suarez is expected to come back tonight, and it sounds like Julio, as soon as the 10 days are up, he's going to be good to go. So that lineup is getting healthy. Mitch Haniger has been putting in a ton of work, it sounds like, the last couple of days. Hopefully the day off helped Cal Raleigh's thumb. So hopefully they are getting healthy, getting guys hot. Jared Kelnick's been pretty solid since getting called back up. So gotta love that.
Is a different Kelnick, let's
be
honest.
Elite. And I do want to mention also about the Orioles. They kind of remind me of the Mariners from last season, the team that was still in it late September, wasn't really in win now mode, just fell short. Yeah. That's the vibes the Orioles give me right now. So Mariners at 4, San Diego Padres are at 3 for me. This is my hot take. I know a lot of people are like, really? Have you watched what they've been doing? But that lineup, if they get hot, that team is going to go on a run. There is no lineup besides maybe the Dodgers and maybe the Braves that has as much depth, as much star power as the San Diego Padres. If the pitching can get on, they can get red hot. They have. I just have a gut feeling. They remind me of the 2019 Nationals and last year's Braves that somehow snuck in and then just went on a tear. Both teams went on to win the World Series. I could easily see the Padres being that team this season. At number 2, I've got the Toronto Blue Jays. This one was pretty easy. It all comes down to pitching. You got Kevin Gausman, Jose Barrios, and Alek Manoah. Those 3 can compete with anyone. Talked about with the Mariners. Those 3 guys, top of the rotation stuff. The question is, who will be number 4 in a playoff series? Will it be Ross Stripling? Will it be Mitch White? That leaves a lot to be desired either way, but this lineup's going to score runs. They have so much pop, so much juice in the bats, and playing in that stadium in the postseason, it's unbelievable, that atmosphere. So Blue Jays at 2, and at number 1, easy call, Braves or Mets, whichever one falls in that wild card. I think it'll be the Mets winning that division. I think the Braves get the wild card, and I think it benefits them more. Their pitching's just ridiculous, so good. That lineup from top to bottom, there's not an easy out in it. They're better than a good chunk of these division winners. I think they're behind the Dodgers. They're a push with the Mets, and they're behind the Astros. I think they're better than everyone else. So it's really going to be tough for whichever team draws Atlanta in that first wild card round. So there's my top 8. What are your thoughts?
I think the biggest disagreements that I have with you are how high the National League wild card guys are for you, because you're right. They're solid teams. There's a reason that they're still in it by the end of the year, but just looking at that competition, I mean, you have the AL, and everybody's like, "Ooh, do we want to slide down in the standings so that we don't have to play against the Astros?" And then you go to the National League, and it's like, who do you want to play? You've got those juggernaut teams that are just gonna squash these little guys. I don't think there's a question about it. That's why the Padres and the Brewers and the Phillies were not even in my top half, because I don't see them having a chance once they get to play these big teams. Whereas the AL, there's a little more competition where somebody could get to, that AL championship series and knock off those Astros, maybe, please. Lord Almighty, please.
I've got the Brewers and Phillies in my bottom 2. So I think whoever gets that third wild card spot is one and done. The Padres and Braves, I think whoever wins that series, which looks like that's going to be the series, that gives them a ton of momentum. They just beat a really good team regardless. And yeah, they'd have to go play the Dodgers, but the Dodgers will be sitting out for a little bit. The Braves have shown that they can hang with the Dodgers, that they can beat the Dodgers. The Padres, I'm a little bit more concerned about with the Dodgers. But again, if that lineup gets hot, they can hit with anybody. So I love the depth of the Padres lineup, even though it hasn't lived up to the hype. They just, again, have that feeling, get hot at the right time, not a team that you're going to want to face. So the playoffs are going to be very fascinating, especially with that extra wild card round this year. It'll be interesting. But like you said, it's fascinating. Some teams want to drop maybe a little bit. Maybe that might not be a good idea in the American League with how well Cleveland's playing now. You probably want to be still in that series just in case you win. You play the Yankees instead of the Astros. But I mean, the American League, I don't see anyone that I really feel confident in going and playing against. But that's the playoffs. You're not supposed to feel confident against anybody.
Right. Just get there.
Exactly. Please, Mariners, just get there, please. That is going to do it for our wild card rankings. Now we're going to get into our newest edition of our Mount Rushmore series. We are flying through these. It is getting close to the end. Got another AL West team, though. This week, it is the Texas Rangers. This one was actually kind of tough. I had a couple of guys coming in that I'm like, yeah, they're definitely going to be on it. Guys that I had to talk myself or debate with myself, which way do I lean here? Right. It's an interesting one, but let's go ahead and jump right in. We're going to start with, I think, the easiest no-brainer, one of the greatest catchers of all time, all around, Ivan Pudge Rodriguez. Pudge was just He's a special player, incredible statistics, especially defensively, but it's what he can do with the bat that really made him stand out amongst catchers. A 304, 341, 488 slash line with the Rangers, 217 career home runs with Texas, 842 RBIs, 1,747 hits, an 828 OPS, and his defense was incredible. He threw out a total of 661 base runners. This is in his entire career, but that's 46% of would-be base stealers that he gunned down. That is absolute insanity. Most games started as a catcher by any player at MLB history with 2,427. I mean, he's the guy you think of when you thought of catchers growing up. He was right there with Mike Piazza, but Pudge was he's the perfect balance on offense and defense.
Yep. I was just about to say, we were talking a couple weeks ago about Piazza and saying he was one of the greatest offensive catchers in the game. And Pudge is his biggest competition in my eyes. You said the stats. He won an MVP. He won 10 straight All-Star vote competitions, 10 straight Gold Gloves, 6 Silver Sluggers. And do you know why he got 10 straight Gold Gloves? He was the most terrifying presence behind the plate that there was, regularly throughout almost 50% of would-be Steelers. I did crunch the numbers for his Texas years, and other than when he was just starting out, 48.5% was his average. The next closest is 30%. That's Johnny Bench and Thurman Munson numbers. Just ridiculous. Leads the team in defensive wins above replacement, of course. Who else would? Still above average bat. You don't get that. Texas was just spoiled having him. You just don't have that kind of value from backstops like you did with Pudge. There isn't a single team that would have passed on prime Ivan Rodriguez as their franchise catcher for as long as they could have him. There will never be another number 7 for the Rangers. First ballot Hall of Famer. He is the greatest Ranger in history, period.
Without question. The second one was one I had as a no-brainer coming in, and I think you, once you looked at the numbers, put him
I was teetering a little bit, but I had to. Yeah.
It's Michael Young. He was kind of that fan favorite. The fans absolutely adored Michael Young. I always think of the video when he got traded of that little kid that just was so distraught that his Michael Young had been traded, just heartbroken. And that's how many Rangers fans felt of all ages. I mean, this guy was a hitting machine. 301, 347, 444 slash line with Texas, 177 home runs, 984 RBIs, 2,230 career hits with Texas, a 791 OPS, franchise leader in games, at bats, hits, runs, doubles, triples, total bases, averaged 195 hits per season, just flirting with that 200. And he hit today. He'd be able to beat the shift. You wouldn't be able to shift him. He could spray it all over the field. He could hit for power occasionally if you needed him to. The dude was just, I know we call Albert Pujols a machine. Michael Young was also just a hit machine with Texas.
Yeah, 13 years with the club, just raking up all of the franchise records. You listed them, just insane. Went to 7 All-Star games, won an All-Star game MVP, won that Gold Glove, won a batting title in 2005. His number is retired. He's a member of the Rangers Hall of Fame. The team knew how special he was, and the fans did too. Just one of the most under-the-radar, consistent top hitters of his era. He hit over 300 7 times in a 9-year period as he came into form. Just ridiculous. Moved around consistently too. I mean, that's what I appreciate most about him, is that team was falling apart around him. They were trying to plug in pieces, and they're like, hey, you're going to play second. You're going to play third. You're going to play first. You're going to DH. You're going to play some outfield. I'm surprised that they didn't have him pitch. If the position pitching was a thing back then, I feel like they would have thrown him in quite a few times. And the guy just he might have complained a little bit, but he was there. He was doing what he needed to do for his team and for his city. And yeah, there is no other fan favorite like him in Texas Rangers.
No, he was a team guy. He just cared about whatever he could do to help the team. So Michael Young, pretty easy call there. Number 3 is another lovable guy, Adrian Beltre.
Oh yeah.
Adrian Beltre. I mean, nobody had fun playing baseball like Adrian Beltre. There's guys who are having fun now, but Beltre just had a blast. And he really, at the tail end of his career, is when he went to Texas, and he had some of his best years, arguably his best set of years with the Rangers. The guy just, his defense was just insanity. It was crazy how many plays Adrian Beltre made that you're like, oh, that's a base hit. Never mind, it's Beltre over there. He got him routinely.
Right.
No problems. Right. The 304, 357, 509 slash line with the Rangers, 199 home runs, 699 RBIs, 333 walks, 1,277 hits, and 865 OPS. I don't know if you have this note, but this is my favorite note, so I just have to share it. The first American League player to win the Platinum Glove, which became a thing in 2011, and he won the first 2 of them. Yep. That just explains how incredible his defense was. And again, I'll never forget, obviously, the shenanigans being a Mariners fan between him and Felix. The guy just had a great time playing baseball, and the fans, they had a great time watching it.
Yeah. When I first started, I was like, we might be a little biased here. I didn't think that there would be any differences with us putting in Beltre, even when I penciled him in before doing all of the research. But no, I think that any Texas Ranger fan would be the exact same. Beltre solidified himself as one of the greatest third basemen of all time, and he did it while he was a Ranger. And let's be honest, the Rangers and their fans are honored to have them on their Rushmore, because Mariners would have loved to keep him around for a little while longer. Yeah. So just a lovable but scary jokester. I loved all of the videos of people trying to touch his head and him just going crazy on him. Like you mentioned, the friendship / rivalry with Felix, the pretending to steal pop-ups from not just his teammates but fans as well. I love that video of the fan caught a foul ball and he takes it from him and like, oh, okay, no, I'm playing with you. It gives it back. But he was just one of those guys that made baseball as fun as it can be anytime he was on the field. I just loved watching him. You mentioned the 2 Platinum Gloves. That goes so much more beyond Gold Glove, because it is the best defensive player. It's not, oh, we're looking at this category, we're looking at this position, and we're seeing top of the game. That's what you describe him as. So went to 3 All-Star games, got 3 Gold Gloves, 2 Silver Sluggers, 2 Platinum Gloves. You knew when he took a knee as he made contact with the ball that it was going out. I love it. I love it.
It's that iconic moment where he moves the on-deck circle. Of course, he got ejected.
Oh, yes.
Just hilarious. Yes. And, of course, that was when fans, I think, started turning on Joe West, like, all right, maybe it's time for you to get out of the cage. Just little moments like that were just special with Adrian Beltre. The head thing between him and Elvis Andrus, like you talked about, just little things like that made Beltre so much fun to watch. Loved by any team that he's ever played for, and every team that he had played for, that fan base was still rooting for him when he moved on to the next team.
Oh, yeah.
A joy to watch play baseball. Number 4 is where we have our one difference. This was so hard for me. This is one of the hardest decisions I've made for a Mount Rushmore. I ended up going with the guy who is just adored by fans, even though he didn't play there long. I went with Nolan Ryan. It was at the tail end of his career. He was in his mid to late 40s the entire run. Only won 51 games with them, had a 3.43 ERA, a 1.12 whip, 939 strikeouts in 840 innings. That is insane at the age he was at. even after he was with the team, and I know that we don't put anything into this, so I didn't, but I just do want to mention, of course, he stuck with the Rangers in the front office, was their president and CEO,
Oh, yeah.
showed how much he loved Arlington. 5th in strikeouts in franchise history. He wasn't even in the top 10 in innings or games played. That's mind-blowing how many strikeouts he had. And the fans just loved him. The fans loved everything about him. He had iconic moments with the Rangers. Of course, we talked about the Ventura thing, beating him up, but also he had one with Bo Jackson where Bo hit a line drive, hit Nolan Ryan. Nolan Ryan's lip was split open. He was bleeding, picked up the ball, threw out Bo Jackson, refused to come out of the game, even though his lip was just spewing blood. Ended up striking out Bo Jackson's next time up on 4 of the hardest pitches Nolan Ryan ever threw as a Texas Ranger. Just things like that. Nolan Ryan is almost like this mythical figure that you just can't believe he actually pitched in Major League Baseball. And the fans just have so many fond memories of watching him play. He's a loved Ranger. He had to be on the list for that.
Yeah, I thought that I'd have him on 2 lists in a row. Just not quite there. Had more competition than I thought he was going to when we were talking about it last week. But he made it real close. Just not quite enough service time, in my opinion. But like you mentioned, just fantastic years in the twilight of his career with the Rangers. 15 complete games. At that age, that is ridiculous. And he wasn't throwing 86 mile an hour fastballs for those complete games either. He was still bringing the heat, got 5 shutouts, his final 2 no-hitters were with the Rangers. Oh, and he's wearing that hat in Cooperstown. So I don't fault you at all for adding him, but number 4 for me had to be Juan Gonzalez. When I was growing up, thinking of the Rangers made me think of one player, and that was Juan Gonzalez. That typical 90s power hitter, but just perfect that launch angle. These were line drive home runs every single time. He averaged over 30 home runs a season with Texas, not including the first 2 years where he wasn't even a qualified, player. 293, 342, 565 slash line, 372 home runs, 1,180 ribbies, 5 hits shy of 1,600, 31 wins above replacement. He was a 2-time MVP winner. One of those MVP winning seasons, he was an all-star snub. We were talking about that on one of our Mariners minis a while ago. How incredible of a second half do you have to win an MVP and not get an all-star vote? Just insane.
Asked and answered.
Yep. He did make it to 2 all-star games, got 5 silver sluggers, and one of the most memorable home run derby championships of all time, 1993 standoff against Griffey in Camden Yards. Griffey hit the warehouse, but not to be outdone, that right-handed hitter hit a play I don't think it's ever been hit since. I mean, that lofty second deck there, just an insane power hitter. Leads the franchise in home runs, RBIs, and extra base hits. Top 5 in pretty much everything else offensively. There was some drama between him and the management, and drama related to alleged steroid use, but nothing ever stuck. And I feel like he absolutely deserves to be on the list.
And he should be in the Hall of Fame. I mean, it's crazy that he didn't get in there because the accusations against him were same level as accusations against Pudge Rodriguez. Someone said that they did. There's no evidence that they actually did. So
I was reading up on that, and the bag that they found in the airport, and they're like,
yep.
I don't know whose bag that is, and I don't know what's in it, but I do know that steroids aren't in it, so you can trust me. It's like, you're just trying to cover your own butt. If nothing sticks, I'm not playing judge there. If they don't get popped, I'm not holding rumors against them.
And a guy, Juan Gonzalez, obviously on my honorable mention. I debated for a while between him and Nolan Ryan. Another guy on my honorable mention did get popped, Rafael Palmeiro.
Yep.
That he stayed off. He was below, I think, all these guys anyway. Also, the steroid scandal had him bumped down, and also Josh Hamilton. Josh Hamilton, his story was unbelievable. It's sad that it ended up, he ended up having some issues again. But I mean, that guy was the face of that team that was World Series contenders every year. Great story, great hitter. So those are my 3 honorable mentions. What did you have for yours?
Nolan Ryan, of course. Rafael Palmeiro. Palmeiro, he was closer than some of the others, but yeah, that PED pop, not quite as much of a connection with the fans. And I'd argue his best years were in Baltimore. He was a solid player in Texas, but if I'm only looking at Texas, I don't think he quite makes the cut there. Got Buddy Bell as well. Best years were clearly with Texas for that solid player. And just, I mean, 4 All-Star games, 6 Gold Gloves, a Silver Slugger, over 1,000 hits, just real solid numbers there.
And a good baseball name.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then Ian Kinsler, actually, you're Josh Hamilton, I'm Ian Kinsler. You gotta have somebody from that team on that honorable mentions list. And honestly, Kinsler would probably be higher if Texas didn't just shoot themselves in the foot and trade him for an aging Prince Fielder. So
yeah, that 100%. That was a trade that was questionable at best for the Texas Rangers. So there you have it. Our top 4 Texas Rangers of all time. Pudge Rodriguez, Michael Young, Adrian Beltre, and Nolan Ryan. For me, you had Pudge, Michael Young, Adrian Beltre, and Juan Gonzalez. I think there's a clear drop-off kind of after 5.
Yeah.
That was where Palmeiro landed, and then everybody else below. But that'll do it for our Texas Rangers Mount Rushmore. Next week is gonna be probably the most difficult one. Next week, Jacob, it's time for the New York Yankees. We're gonna have to break down the top 4 Yankees of all time. It is going to be a nightmare. Better start prepping right now, because that's going to take a lot of thinking and a lot of digging to come up with just 4 Yankees in that.
Well, we got 2 weeks to do it at least. So
2 weeks. That's right. Yeah. We're going to need the extra time for sure. So that'll do it for this edition of Mount Rushmore. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we got some football to talk about 3 weeks into the NFL season. I always said, of course, now we know who's what in the NFL. Who are the biggest surprises, teams and players? We both brought some shocks so far in this 2022 NFL season. We'll talk about them next here on the Kingsmen Sports Podcast.
There are many ways for businesses to expand their customer base, but one of the tried and true ways of increasing customer loyalty and recognizing employees is to put your name and logo on promotional and motivational items. You can find a wide selection at Alderson's Awards West Printwares in Centralia. Shirts, hats, coats, mugs, pens, and more, all with high-quality screen printing or embroidery done on site. For a full catalog of items at great prices, go to aldersons.net, and remember, you will get maximum impact at Awards West Printwares.
Welcome back to the Kingsmen Sports Podcast. I teased that we're going to talk about some NFL surprises, but we do have a decree coming up. Jacob, you want it for our August team draft for baseball, so you get the mic. You said you have a football one, so I'm going to go ahead and mute up and let you have the floor.
All right. This one might get me some hate, because more football is more fun, right? But football is for Sundays and Mondays and Thanksgiving. And in a perfect world, that would be it. And and it's hard because I fully understand the idea behind it. You have more games spread out, you get more viewership for those individual games. There's no reason for that with all of the streaming, with all of the red zone, with all of the if you have good quality games, they're going to get viewership. It doesn't matter if it's Thursday afternoon or Saturday in December, or I'll get to that in a bit. But you have companies spending billions of dollars for the rights to these games, and I'll talk about that, I'm sure, more later on as well. And so you make more money. So why not max that out? And you and I were talking about how foolish it was to have 2 Monday night games, especially overlapping. It's getting more and more ridiculous. Pretty soon, we're going to start having Saturday games more this year than ever before. And I understand that's partly because of Christmas, but football Saturday just seems odd to me. Having the majority of the games played on Saturday over Sunday, it's flat out weird. But in truth, we haven't been without at least some Saturday football in ages. It's a thing once college ends. And then we have Thursday night football, and that's really starting to pick up. You have more primetime games than it used to, and that's partly because Amazon's ponying up the dough and they have that huge 10-year contract. In fact, they're trying to get Friday night games added in the future because Amazon, Black Friday, shop, watch, you name it. So pretty soon we're going to have Sundays, Mondays, Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. Why stop there? Why not Tuesdays and Wednesdays? Those games or those days needs viewership as well. And so as a fan, it seems like it would give you the best options for viewing as many games as possible, right? But that just isn't the case most of the time. Even when Thursday night football wasn't streaming exclusively with Amazon Prime, the midweek game only saw about 16 million viewers last year. Sunday night football and Monday night football are pushing 20. So that Thursday night, it's expected to drop even more because of the exclusiveness of this year as well. So I don't think it's as smart of a move for companies as they're thinking. And whether it's the waning baseball season competing, which let's be honest is doubtful, or people actually having lives during the week, which is probably even more doubtful, or just the quality and availability of games. People just don't seem to engage in Thursday night football as well. And that's TV. You go to actual stadium viewership, and it has similar tendencies. But hey, exclusive TV viewership is more of a moneymaker than actual physical ticket sales. So the ownership, the NFL, they don't care as much, but the fans end up getting screwed. I mean, imagine imagine you're, a Steelers fan or a Cleveland fan that your team isn't getting a lot of primetime games, but they have those 1 or 2 games a year that's possible. Well, half of those aren't home games. And then now they're making those the primetime Thursday night. People have lives, and you might miss out on the best game of the year, even if you are one of those fans that goes to as many games as possible. So the fans are getting screwed. But you know who's getting screwed more? Are the players. It is just an insane amount of work that goes into prepping for Sunday football. As a professional NFL player, this is doing nothing but interfering with that. Your typical NFL team will have a very set schedule for their personnel and their players. And I did a whole bunch of research, and I crammed, most of the examples I found were team specific. So forgive me if one day I talk about something that another team does on another day. But typically, Sunday, they're going to have a game. Monday, they're going to review that film as a team, go over corrections they need to make, treat any potential injuries, and start working to maintain their strength and flexibility throughout the week. So hitting the weight room, more or less. Tuesday, the coaches are preparing that game plan for the following week, and players technically have a day off, but that's never the case. They're working out more, they're continuing their injury treatments, and they're studying next week's game film to prepare for their opponents. Wednesday, coaches pass out that game plan to deal with next week's adversary. It's time to put that prep into practice. Players will have 10-hour workday. Make sure they're ready for the core schemes teams will utilize that weekend. They're going to focus on first and second downs. They're going to practice on marching down the field. And then don't forget those weights. So that's a long, strenuous day. Thursday, another practice to prepare for the weekend ahead, going into third downs and sub packages and do or die situations on both sides of the ball. Of course, more weight room, more conditioning, making sure that their bodies are ready for the workload ahead of them. Friday, getting that game ready mentality, ironing out all of the wrinkles. This is that no mistakes practice. You practice as if you are on the field playing. You want crisp, clean play as if it's game time. You're going to practice your red zone, your clock management, some potential trick plays that you might use to get an edge, and make sure you're ready for the weekend, both physically and mentally. Saturday is for review and travel. You're going over your game plan without your gear, kind of a real light practice. You don't want any last minute injuries. Wrapping up quickly so you can either get to the airport or get to the hotel. Home games, you stay in a hotel. Doesn't matter if you live nearby, and you are ready to compete on Sunday. Now tell me, which of those days would you like to skip or rush or combine? You hear people talking about how Monday night games have a disadvantage because of their shortened week. That's just one day. Try cutting it in half and having a game on Thursday or Saturday or Friday. It's not fair. Adding those extra days just for the sake of trying to spread out viewership is not only bad for the sport and the players, it's weakening the quality of play, it's increasing the risk of injury, and it's not connecting with the fans as well. So it really needs to have an end. I get that there are practices in place, there are contracts in place. You aren't gonna have a clean break. This is done. We're going to just Sunday morning, afternoon, and night. But there has to be some kind of line drawn where you are not overworking these players as much as they are right now, because Thursday night, Saturday night, Friday night soon, it is too much. And it's really hard to prepare my fantasy team for it. So that might have been the kicker for me, but that's my decree, is really cut the crap with adding all these extra days. Just let football be a weekend thing. Sunday, wake up 9:30 in the morning, you get to drink beer. God allows his day to be shared with football. Just stop adding all of the extra ones.
Your fantasy team needs a lot more help than not playing games on Saturday, I will say. And
you are correct.
I'm not saying anything. I don't think you ever officially said it, is that you're talking about NFL football, obviously not college football. People don't try and twist that or get confused.
Although I would love if college football stuck to their Saturday and did not branch out, that high school football stuck to their Fridays and didn't branch it out. I mean, I know it.
Don't get me started on the high school football, because there's an official shortage that is causing them to play all sorts of weird days that they don't want to play, obviously being forced to. So be nice to do officials is, I think, the key part of Jacob's thing. Not really, but all right. So there's Jacob's decree. We're going to move right along into our next topic. And again, these are the biggest surprises to us of the 2022 NFL season so far, 3 weeks in. Starting to get a better feel for some teams, some players. We're starting to see if they're for real or if they just got off to great starts in weeks 1 or 2. or just in week 1. I'm going to go ahead and kick things off with Tua and the Dolphins. This team is legit one of the best offenses in football. Tua's second in passing yards. This offense can go out there and score on anyone. We talked about their defense in preseason, that was going to be maybe what they leaned on a little bit. Well, Tua's taken that next step. Tyreek has just meshed right into that offense. Of course, Jalen Waddle, we knew he had a connection with Tua. What has really blown me away, of course, aside from Tua, we now know Tua's for real. Tua can compete in the NFL. This run game, Chase Edmonds has been really, really good for the Dolphins. They have a run game. They have a wonderful head coach. This team is legitimately a contender to go on a run. Of course, it gets different once you get to the postseason, but the way that the Dolphins have come out and just beaten really solid teams like the Patriots, they beat the Ravens, and they beat the Bills. This team's legit. This team has a chance to go on a run. They're a Super Bowl contender. You can't overlook them. That's my top surprise thus far.
Yeah, there was a lot of money lost last week when the Dolphins beat the Bills. I could not believe it. That defense is the real deal. Yeah, I mean, we were talking about Ravens defense is better, Bills defense is better, and Dolphins defense showed up and got turnovers, shut down really good offenses. Just fantastic. I mean, everything's coming together really nicely for them. I'm also going to talk about a surprise team that just firing on all cylinders and didn't really see it happening. And that's the Lions. The run game is better than I thought. I mean, I thought Swift was going to have a career year. I did. But you and I early in the offseason were talking about running back duos. I don't think either of us saw DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams doing as well as they are, but that is a great 1-2 punch. Williams having more touchdowns than he knows what to do with just because the rest of the offense is getting him there. Amon-Ra St. Brown, killer wide receiver 1, and DJ Chark seems to be coming into form a little bit, and that's probably because teams have to do so good against Sun God over there, but just it's crazy. They're gonna make the Vikings and the Packers work harder to make sure that one of them doesn't fall to the bottom half of that division. It's gonna be a tighter race than I thought at the beginning of the year. That's for darn sure.
And as a Packers fan, Jamal Williams is one of the easiest players to root for. Of course, he was a former Packer. He makes the most of the carries. It does suck. DeAndre Swift injured. It sounds like he might miss a couple weeks. But you didn't mention TJ Hawkinson, who's a sleeper tight end. He's a really, really good tight end. Doesn't get the targets because that offense is so loaded. If that defense can get a little bit better, kind of play more consistent, the Lions could – they could compete for a wild card for sure. Of course, they play the Seahawks this week. That'll probably be a win. No offense, Seahawks fans out there. You guys just aren't that good. But the Lions, they're good. My next one is another team, but more so the quarterback. It's the Eagles, but I want to focus more in on Jalen Hurts because coming into the season, a lot of people were high on the Eagles, that they could be a dark horse team. A lot of people who were hesitant about him were like, but we don't really know about Jalen Hurts. We know about Jalen Hurts now. Third in yards passing with 916. Only has 4 passing touchdowns. But that's because they run the ball so well. Their defense does such a good job. They score points. Yeah. He's also rushing the ball well, 167 rushing yards, 3 rushing touchdowns, only 1 interception. As the Eagles as a team are averaging almost 29 points per game. They're going to run through the NFC East. There's no question in my mind anymore. If they can establish the run game a little bit better, which has been the weaker spot on that team, as Miles Sanders and Boston Scott have been a little inconsistent. So just need to find that consistency on the run game. But if they can, I mean, I think they might be the best team in the NFC. They look really, really good, Jacob.
You're just upset about the Giants losing it for you. That's why you're like, oh, they're gonna run through that whole division. You're just a little salty about last night.
Does not deserve the hate that he's getting. That offensive line of the Giants is brutal.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't really disagree with you. I was one of those that I'm like, I think Cowboys are going to take it this year. I mean, divine intervention said no to that. So we're going to see how long they're going to be struggling. But yeah, Eagles are just
Are the Cowboys struggling because they're 2-0 with Cooper Rush? He's 3-0 as a starter. Quarterback controversy in Dallas.
Romo seems to really be a believer, so we'll see how that goes. But Eagles are just taking what they can, and I think that they're going to be off to such a lead that it's not going to matter once the Cowboys figure it out that the Eagles are going to run away with it, like you said. I'm also going to focus on actually my next 3 are quarterbacks / teams, but the first one is Tom Brady. Tom Brady is, let's be honest, Tom Brady's usually kind of a slow starter, right? Every year around week 2, 3, 4, we're like, this is the year he's done. But this year just seems different. I went back and I watched even the highlights of his games where he is making connections with his wideouts. He's not looking around the field like he normally does. This is I'm used to Brady the magician that's just always finding his man that nobody else is looking at, that just picks apart defenses with guys who aren't really top notch all the time. And I'm telling you, he's not moving his eyes away from the primary receiver, but maybe 1 out of every 10 times. And sometimes it works out because he has good receivers and he's Tom Brady, but more often than not, he's forcing things, and he's got more incompletions. He's giving the ball to guys who are fumbling right away because they're getting hit right as they get the ball, and just disappointing drives. 3 touchdowns so far through 3 games is not a good look for Brady, especially with the squad that's surrounding him, unless they're hurt or suspended. I know this week was kind of a stretch, but even against even against the Saints, they were looking flat. I don't know what the issue is, but I think it's more than just one more year added to his clock. It's not it's that field awareness. I don't see it being there this year. I don't know why.
I think there's some off the field. Of course, they've documented stuff with his family that we don't really know about, so I'm not going to get into that. That
Right.
could be a possibility. I mean, they have faced some good defenses. The Cowboys defense looks solid. The Saints defense is good, and the Packers defense is really good. So maybe that's it. But the excuse that he doesn't have receivers to throw to, I know you weren't the one to make it, but I've seen it since that game on Sunday where they lost to Green Bay. I mean, he used to make Chris Hogan look like a legit number 1 receiver in the NFL. So you can't use that as an excuse because Russell Gage is a solid NFL receiver.
Right.
There's something else there that he doesn't have the safety valve in Gronk anymore. He has a good run game still. I'm right there with you. I'm lost on Tom
What drove
Brady.
me nuts about that game against the Packers was not using Fournette. I know sometimes those checkdowns are not the sexy play, but he would not move his head or his eyes, and Fournette is right there with no one 8 to 10 yards near him. And I needed receptions from Fournette for 2 of my games, and it was just not coming. And I'm like, he's right there, and he wouldn't even look on that side of the field.
In that intent or the delay a game. That
2 delay of games. Let's be honest. There were 2. One wasn't called because of the beat, they say, but 2 in a row within the 3-yard line. Unacceptable. Unacceptable.
Not Brady. Yes, I am glad that they did not throw the ball to Leonard Fournette because I benefited that for the Packers and in fantasy football. So thank you, Saquon, for finishing it off for me last night, 3-0. The next team is a surprise for me, but not in a good way. You just had a not good surprise in Brady. My not good surprise is the Las Vegas Raiders. Yeah. What is wrong with this team? They are loaded on offense, and yet they're scoring decent, but they're not scoring like a top-tier offense. And they went out and got Chandler Jones. You have Chandler Jones and Max Crosby. They're tied for the fewest sacks in football. They have 2 through 3 games. They've allowed the 8th most points. That secondary is not good at all, but it's the offense. The offense needs to be out there putting up more points, and the pass rush has to be better. If the pass rush is good, that takes so much pressure off the secondary. The secondary doesn't have to be great. They just have to do a good job initially. How they aren't getting pressure on these quarterbacks that they're playing, and they're not necessarily playing mobile quarterbacks. Justin Herbert isn't a mobile quarterback. I know Kyler is, but neither is Ryan Tannehill. He's practically a statue. How are you not getting pressure on these guys? The loss to Tennessee really has me hitting the panic button. And I'm a Packers fan, but I love this, that week 1, we had to hear all about how Devontae Adams by himself outgained Packers receivers. It's weird how that stat has just disappeared the last couple of weeks, but I digress from that. This offense has too many weapons to not be having success. Hunter Renfrow has to figure things out. He's putting the ball on the deck too much. Got to get Josh Jacobs more involved. But Chandler Jones and Max Crosby have to find a way to get pressure on quarterback. Otherwise, they're going to get eaten alive every week.
Yeah, and I've been one of those guys that every single year am defending Derek Carr. And this might be the last year of that. If things are not figured out, I'm selling on Derek Carr. I can't do it anymore. He has the tools that he needs. And looking at Adams, he makes plays out of nothing, and they're just not connecting. And I don't know what it is. There's not even really an attempt. If you are going to just throw a ball away, at least throw it in his direction. And he's going to do things more often than not, it seems. Hunter Renfrow is too good to be playing this poorly. I mean, the stats are adding up, but they would have added up so much quicker without the drops and without the miscommunications. Josh Jacobs is a great running back and needs to be utilized. Part of me is wondering, what are the coaches doing right now? We thought that their coaching situation was going to be better this year without all of the drama, but I don't know who's calling the plays. They need to tear it down to the drawing board and see what's going to work to actually make this offense that has all of these weapons come to life. And then that defense, individually, they're doing okay. I was talking to you this last week. Rock Ya-Sin, as a Colts fan, solid secondary if he stays away from the penalties. And he has been. He's been doing a decent job. They just need to put the pieces together and figure out how to stop some of these teams and actually score more points than the other team does.
Maybe Devontae shouldn't have left a pretty good situation. That's all I'm going to say. Let's get on to your next surprise.
My next surprise is Joe Burrow / his line. His line isn't as big of a surprise, but his incapability of dealing with the issues his line is causing is a shock to me. It's been a rough year for the Bengals, a rough start, let's say. It's clear that whatever they tried to do to budget piece something together to resemble an offensive line that would keep their quarterback alive is a complete and utter failure. It's not working. What's really alarming is Joe Burrow, his reactions to those issues. He's trying to be Lamar Jackson with his legs. He's trying to be Patrick Mahomes with his cool little passes, and it's not working. Fumbles and interceptions and dead drives are rampant. It should not be the case for that offense with the weapons that they have. They need to get Joe some protection ASAP, or he is going to be the next Andrew Luck, where injuries kill a special career and lead to a premature departure either from Cincy or from the game entirely. But they need to figure that out real quick, because front office neglect to the quarterback is not a good look.
Yeah, especially not to a quarterback that just took you to a Super Bowl.
Right.
is very young, extremely talented, all the potential in the world, and I need him for fantasy football. So him and Chase
for years to come.
I've invested a lot in that right there. But yeah, that I'm more concerned about the offensive line than I am Burrow. I think if you give Burrow time, like you said, it's the incapability of him dealing with it all of a sudden as compared to in the postseason last year, because the line hasn't really gotten better at all since he joined that team. So yeah, they got to find
worse, and his play has.
But that's the thing is, I don't really know. He got hot in the middle of last season towards the end. Everything else, he hasn't been, that incredible quarterback in his career. He's been good. I still consider him good, but that line is the issue for him. I have no question about it. Once you get that line situated, Joe Burrow is going to be Joe Burrow.
Yeah. And if you don't, then he's going to be in the ICU. So,
hey, 4 years he could be a Green Bay Packer. Let's move into my number one. This is a team that I don't think anybody saw sitting at 2-1 atop their division and just dog walking a couple of teams. The Jacksonville Jaguars. Yeah, I know you as a Colts fan, you were looking at that week 2 game and said, we just got shut out by the Jaguars. That might not be the worst thing in the world right now. Of course, getting shut out is never a good thing, but the Jaguars, this team's really good. They've played really good. They're 7th in points scored, 4th in points allowed defensively. So that defense, which has always been the backbone of the Jaguars, even though sometimes it hasn't necessarily been good, it's still been better than what their offense is. They're tied for first in takeaways. They're tied for fewest in turnovers. They've only turned the ball over once so far this season. Christian Kirk and Trevor Lawrence apparently have a great connection, because everyone kind of laughed when Kirk got that big contract. He's playing some pretty good football right now, if I do say so myself. The running back duo of James Robinson and Travis Etienne, that's one of the top ones in all of football, I think. I don't think there's any debate in it anymore. James Robinson looks like the James Robinson we saw 2 years ago, just a stellar guy. And then Etienne, they're not just throwing him into the NFL play. Remember, he didn't play at all last year. They're easing him in, and I think that's going to benefit in the long run as well. And Trayvon Walker looks like a number 1 draft pick. He is a superstar. That defense, I think, is what really blows me away. After what they did to the Chargers, I know Herbert wasn't 100%. They didn't have Keenan Allen. They still took care of business like good teams do against teams that are beat up. The Jaguars, I think they could be a playoff team, Jacob.
By process of elimination, maybe, but I don't see them as good of a team as you do. I'm looking at their individual plays, and there are just so many mistakes still being made that that other teams aren't forcing them to pay for yet. And I'm just waiting. I thought the Chargers were going to do it. I thought that Chargers defense was really going to make them pay for some of those poor play callings and poor pass attempts that just float harmlessly to the ground. And they need to clean up their quality of play. Even if the end result is decent, there are teams that are not going to let them get to that end result. My last surprise is Matt Ryan. And I know that's not as big of a surprise to some people, but I still think even the people that thought he's not going to be, Matt Ryan of 10 years ago, I don't think they thought it was going to be this bad. But Matt Ryan is just not cutting the mustard anymore. The Kansas City Chiefs game did not change that fact at all. Don't get me wrong, the offensive play calling is atrocious, but you need a quarterback that can handle running the show. And it's crystal clear, that Matty Ice is not that any longer. They need to make some serious changes, because the Chiefs gift wrapped that game at least 3 different times, and they still made it closer than they needed to. That's not going to be the case every week. Just like I said for the Jags. They are going to play teams that are not as forgiving, and they're not going to get away with the sloppiness. I personally would love to see Sam Ehlinger get some playing time. I think that it could be later in games. He's looked phenomenal in both this preseason and last year's preseason. I think with the other weapons that they have on offense, I think he could get some good looks later on in games and just see what sticks. I know that they went out and they got Foles as a backup this offseason. I'd like to pretend they didn't. I'd like for them to pretend that they didn't. Just that was a fever dream, and Foles is a free agent, and it's Sam's turn.
I don't think you're going to see Sam step on the field unless it's in garbage time or Matt Ryan's hurt. I don't know.
There's been a lot of garbage time this year, Matt. I'm just saying. There's already been a lot of garbage time. And
well,
no Sam.
You know, a tie game with the Texans and a close game with the Chiefs. I don't know if there was any garbage time in either of those games, but I texted you during that game Sunday and said the Chiefs are just begging the Colts to beat them. They were begging, and they finally did, and they still really even shouldn't have. It was a unsportsmanlike conduct penalty that had the Colts drive keep on rolling and got them that touchdown. The week 2 game against the Jags, I don't know if they get shut out if they have Michael Pittman out there on the field. I think that they probably find some points there. I'm not sure if they win.
I don't know though, because it seems like Matt Ryan's messing up before he even gets the ball off. His footwork looks terrible. His awareness, everything about it. It seems like I know that line is not as lights out as we were expecting it to be, but there's no reason for a veteran like that to lose his cool so quickly that can't even get it to the receivers.
The defense still does look good, but I want to ask you this. Would you take Ryan Tannehill right now over Matt Ryan? Asked and answered right there.
I would take Sam Ehlinger.
that gives me the answer that I need. Thank you very much. Yeah. It is, the AFC South is going to be interesting to watch all season long. I'm personally glad that I don't have to consistently watch it. You enjoy that, though. I'm going to go ahead and watch NFC North offenses, except for the Bears score some points, and the Packers, I guess, aren't necessarily scoring points, but they don't give up a lot. So, well, that'll do it for our NFL talk here after week 3. Again, we will be off next week, so we won't talk about NFL football for a couple of weeks, but then we will, of course, have a couple games to recap. We're going to go take another break, though, and when we come back, we'll have Tristen hopping on it to talk some college football, kind of seeing teams layer out, and, of course, I have to hear him talk about the Ducks and the Cougs game from this weekend. So if you want to see me be absolutely miserable, stick around after this break for more Kingsmen Sports Podcast.
Athletes, the time is now to get serious about improving yourself to reach your goals. We all know that college recruiters and professional scouts put a lot of importance on those tangible measurements, such as a 40 time, your vertical leap, cone drills, and so on. Proactive Physical Therapy in Tumwater has a special, unique training program that will improve your results across the board. If you are serious about raising your performance to the next level, you need to talk with the pros today at Proactive Physical Therapy. Check them out online or call for an appointment today.
Pacific Mobile Structures are big supporters of kids and athletics. If you are in need of temporary office space on a work site or for overflow space, or if your building is in need of major renovation, Pacific Mobile Structures can keep your company at work. Pacific Mobile Structures offers everything from traditional modular classroom space to complete multi-purpose college campus buildings, including Sage classrooms, which combine the latest in healthy learning environments with the best in green building practices. Pacific Mobile Structures can also offer you permanent space for a fraction of the cost to build your own. Go online to check out Pacific Mobile Structures.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Kingsmen Sports Podcast. Got Tristen hopping on to talk some college football. And yes, we are going to start right there. Of course, the Ducks went to Pullman this weekend and pulled one out somehow. The Cougs looked like they had them dead to rights. I told you, I thought the game was over, and all of a sudden questionable play calling towards the end of the game by the Cougs gets Bo Nix and Oregon that extra possession. They're able to score, and of course the pick six that just really sealed it, which turned out to be big since Wazoo did end up going down the field and scoring a touchdown there at the end, and just all sorts of chaos. But I mean, we kind of talked about it before we went on air. I think it boiled down to really one thing, and that's that Oregon offensive line. They're just ridiculous. Anytime Wazoo was able to get pressure, and it wasn't very often, Bo Nix just slid out of the pocket. He has a great feel for it. They weren't able to get more than one guy a free rush on him. That offensive line is legit. I heard about him. Now that I've seen him, you guys got something special there.
Yeah, for sure. We're currently the only team in the FBS with allowing 0 sacks this year, and that's including when we played Georgia, who's obviously a powerhouse. We got BYU, who's a tough team. They pushed Baylor to the brink. Just a physical game with them. Still 0 sacks, and then now you guys, and still 0 sacks throughout the season. So I think it's 80. It was 80% our line, and I'd say 20% Bo Nix, because Bo Nix is very athletic. But I think our O line is just unreal. That's even with a couple injuries. We lost I believe it was our right guard at the beginning of the season. He's got foot surgery, out for the season. But still, we return Forsyth, Walk, all those guys. The whole line has been playing for, I mean, they got to be like 10th year seniors by now, but they've just been playing a whole lot of big games together. And this is the one thing I will give Mario Cristobal credit for. He did develop that O-line very well. He just unfortunately didn't develop much else. But yeah, I think what it boiled down to was, obviously there was the pick six for Bo Nix. I think that is what really set them back to begin with. It was a questionable play call. Because
Same play they had just ran.
It was questionable, but basically the whole game, I would say for about 3 quarters, was just really poor red zone offensive efficiency. Like, we just could not get the ball going in the red zone. And that's kudos to you guys, but I think it was Cam Ward that was the big thing for you guys. Was every chance it had to have been 5-10 times we had him within arm's reach and he just escaped, or he had that one play where he was diving on the ground and he flipped it up, and then 15-20 yard gain, so he's definitely a guy to watch out for the rest of the season. But yeah, I think the big key was the officiating. The officiating was, there were so many things that we're known for it, but this was like a grade A case of just poor officiating. There was a targeting call on DJ Johnson, which I personally didn't agree with.
And I told you that I didn't either. And I saw lots of people in Coug Nation that also thought that was not the best call in the world.
Yeah. I think it was the roughing the passer on Brandon Dorless after that. I could understand. It was a little iffy, but whatever. I can live with that. But
not the worst call of the day.
Yeah, no, definitely not. The targeting was just dumb. And then there was it was like the last minute. The clock was just, I'd say like the last probably 3 minutes, the clock was just, we'd run out of bounds and then it would run off another 20-30 seconds, and then it happened 2 or 3 times in the same drive when we're marching down the field. And then the whole time the Cougs were doing their last drive there was no time on the clock. Like, they just didn't display a time. And so I'm sitting there.
I guess that's not on the refs there, but yeah, it was weird why that was going on. Or at least give us an explanation to what's happening, because I think people were turning like, oh, game's over. Wait, they're still playing.
Because even when that big pass happened, it was at there was no time. So I didn't know if there was 10 seconds left or if there was no time left. So it was just a whole lot of questionable calls there.
And you didn't even mention the biggest one, of course.
Which one?
The
Oh yeah,
intentional grounding that then turned into Wazoo just running the ball to obviously just try and get them a little bit better position to punt the ball away. They punt the ball. We come back from a break. They're in a review, but never say what they're reviewing. We go to another commercial break and come back, and all of a sudden Wazoo has the ball again. Turns out that was only second down, which I mentioned as that play was happening. I'm like, I'm pretty sure it's only second down, but nobody else was losing their mind about it. So I'm like, okay, I must be wrong. And then it puts Wazoo in a weird spot. See, that hurt the Cougs because second down, they're obviously going to throw the ball to try and pick up some yards back, make it third and manageable. If they think it's third and forever, just run the ball. Our punter was having a good game, pin them down deep inside their own territory. So that threw off. I'd never seen anything like that.
No, that was, and looking back at their supposedly at the end of this, you can do it until the end of the series. So they weren't out of the rules doing it. But it was just one of those things that it's like, how do you not catch it? Like your whole job is pretty much to like know what down it is and where to place the ball. Obviously there's rules and stuff that you got to follow as well. But like it was just a huge, I think it was a big momentum killer for Wazoo. And it was, I think it was, they changed it. It was 3rd and 16. They run the ball, punt. And then they restarted it. It was like 3rd and 18. And it was just a huge mess. But yeah, I think Oregon came up with some big plays down the stretch. There's I think it was 4th and 2, 4th and 3, something like that. Bo Nix threw the slant route or post route to Bucky Irving, who's a running back out wide. Given it was against a linebacker, but
yeah, which is mind-boggling with safety help over the top. I don't know why that safety wasn't just taking him if he broke inside.
Yeah, for sure. It was just, I think it was some very solid plays, and had we not got that the pick six at the very end, I think, you know, as you guys still have the ball and marching down the field, who knows what happens at that point. Yeah, you never know. But luckily the game went in my favor.
I told you that the game was going to come down to turnovers. And of course, Wazoo had that pick six, and it looked like that might be the difference maker. But then, of course, Oregon takes one right back. So it was, I don't think you can come away really shaking your head at either team thinking this team is not as good as we thought. They're not good at all. Wazoo actually saw a bump up in the votes for portion of the poll. So they're getting closer to the top 25 despite the loss. And of course, Oregon looks like if they can win out and get some help from other teams losing, that they could still make a run to the playoffs. So I think those are two of the upper tier teams in the Pac-12 going at it. I don't think there's any questions about that now.
I would definitely agree. I think it, and like you said, instead of saying like, oh, this team was so much better than that team, or like normally what they'll do is like a game like this, they'll say, oh, Oregon's bad, like Washington State. But no, it was, I think that game proved that Washington State is a good team and deserves to be ranked. I still think they should be ranked even after this week. I thought they should have been ranked last week. I think they're just a good, solid team, and Cam Ward is going to do some amazing things. He's a stud.
That was Cam's best game of the season. He still has some things to work out. Obviously, going from FCS play to Pac-12 is a big leap, but there's potential. This defense of Wazoo, I know that they gave up a lot of points. I don't know why it drives me crazy when teams go into prevent mode when being aggressive all game is working. So they had the bend but don't break mentality, which was working wonders for them. But hopefully they get right this next week hosting Cal. It's a game the Cougs have to win to get the momentum back on their side. So Pac-12 picture definitely clearing up. Also an interesting matchup this week between UW and UCLA. I'm not sold on either team. I'm more sold on UW than I am on UCLA, but the Huskies finally have to go on the road for the first time this season, and I think they're going to probably win at UCLA because I think UCLA might be the worst 4-0 team in the nation. So interesting games going on next week, but there is also some interesting events happening around the country. We're going to talk about kind of a battle for, I guess it'd be more the 2 seed than it is the 1 seed we determined last week. You, me, and Daniel. Daniel, unfortunately, by the way, not able to join us He had some work stuff that he had to take care of. He'll hopefully be back here in a couple of weeks. But now we're going to debate who the number 2 team is. Of course, there's 3 teams I think that really have an argument: Clemson, Ohio State, and Alabama. You can throw Michigan in there. I just think Michigan's a little bit below these teams. But I looked at these 3 teams this week. It's the first time I've watched Clemson really play a full game. And the offense looks better than they have early in the season. Still turning the ball over too many times. Their defense is still giving up way too many points. I don't see them making it through the ACC without a loss on their record. So I have them as probably the number 5. I don't think they'd make the playoff if it started today. Alabama, I think, would be the 3. I don't think they've really faced much competition besides Texas, and they were lucky to escape that one. They're gonna start facing some better competition this week. They play Arkansas, which will be a tough test. Arkansas coming off that loss to Texas A&M. The Alabama defense is good. Bryce Young, he's going to be solid. Penalties, though, that's a serious problem. 33 penalties so far this season for Bama. That's not what you're used to seeing from the Tide. So they got to clean that up. I have them a little bit below the team I have at 2, which is Ohio State. I'm blown away with Ohio State. The offense is going to be able to score against anybody. I think they're the best offense probably in the nation. Georgia might give them a run, but I still give the edge to Ohio State. The defense is average. They haven't really played a tough offense yet. They've played Notre Dame, Arkansas State, Toledo, and Wisconsin. And you know what you're going to get from CJ Stroud. He's going to go off. They're starting to develop a number 2 receiver, a guy I broadcasted, Emeka Egbuka from Steilacoom. Travion Henderson, he can just run the ball like no other. He's a ground and pound guy, but can also go out and beat you in the flat. He doesn't need to get the touches. He just makes the most of them when he does get them. They'll host Rutgers this week, which should be another blowout win. I think Ohio State's going to roll over the Big Ten. I don't see anyone contending with them. I think they're clearly the number 2 team in the nation.
I would agree. I think Ohio State is going to roll through the Big Ten, but I don't have them at 2. I have at 4, I got Clemson, like you said. I think where they have been good, they have not. I mean, they played Wake Forest, but Wake Forest is always kind of a hit and miss team. You never really know what you're going to get. They're not really known for being like a huge regular, just huge powerhouse team. They played Georgia Tech, Furman, LA Tech. Haven't really blown them out, but haven't really not blown them out. Yeah. When I say blown them out, I mean like Ohio State dropping 77 on Toledo, They've gone up 30 points 31 against Georgia Tech, 22 on Furman, and 28 against LA Tech. There's certain teams. I mean, not to disrespect any of these teams, they're all college athletes. They're good at what they do. But if you are going to go to a college football playoff, you can't be playing teams like Furman and only beating them by 23 points. Right. And only scoring 35. You need to do what Ohio State does and score 77 on them. And that should be the benchmark almost. Right. I mean, that's partially why I think, sorry to bring it back to Oregon, but I think Oregon's putting 70 on a team against an FCS team is what needs to happen. I don't know if Furman is an FCS team or if they're a... They are. Yeah. But yeah, you got to drop 40, 50 at least. So I got Clemson at 4. I think they can, with their schedule, they can probably turn it around, hopefully. QB DJ, he's pretty solid. I haven't got to watch many Clemson games, mainly because I've been sticking to Oregon, and then I'll occasionally watch a Georgia game just to see how dominant they actually are. And then at my 3, I got Ohio State. Like I said earlier, 77 against Toledo. The one game against Notre Dame was their lowest scoring game, which is 21-10. But it's difficult because Notre Dame hasn't been living up to the Notre Dame hype. I mean, per usual, but it's a little bit worse this year than in past
Yeah.
years. But then they go and score 52 on Wisconsin, who's a solid team. But at number 2, I've got Alabama, because not only you got Nick Saban, Bryce Young, who's obviously last year's Heisman, and then Nick Saban, who I think is the GOAT, but they start off the season 55-0 against Utah State. Then they go to Texas 20-19. That's obviously their tough game, which is some questionable stuff. Then 63-7 against LA Monroe and 55-3 against Vanderbilt. If you take out the Texas game, they've allowed 10 points. 29 points total for the year they've allowed, which on top of what they've scored minus the Alabama game, I think their offense is solid enough to score against some really good teams. And then their defense is obviously holding people back. Their next 3 games, though, are looking very, very good for their schedule. They got Arkansas, Texas A&M, and then Tennessee, who are all ranked teams. So that's going to be incredibly good for them. But yeah, I think that would be my not top 3, the next 3, I guess we'll call them.
Right.
Because
yeah,
like we said last week, I mean, even with Georgia's struggles this week against Kent State, which I don't know if you can really call them struggles, but they had some turnovers, whatever it was, Stetson Bennett, whether it was overlooking the opponent or maybe there were some injuries we didn't know about or whatever it was. But I mean, they did struggle. Well, I wouldn't say struggle. They looked normal, which isn't what they've looked like this year. They've looked dominant this year. But I would just take it as it's a one-off game. Like, just everybody has a down game, you know?
Yeah, I looked at that game as Georgia. You're not going to go through a year where you play 12 perfect games.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have a game where you struggle a little bit. If they had that struggle against Kent State, that's good news, because that means they're going to play pretty focused from here on out. So, yeah, the top team's pretty clear, and then I think the next 2 is pretty clear. It's Bama, Ohio State, whatever order you have them in.
Mm-hmm.
Clemson is a little bit debatable for 4. Obviously, with Michigan right there, it's kind of a hazy picture after Ohio State, Bama, and Georgia. There have been some surprises, though, this season. This is going to get into our final topic of this week. Some surprise teams sit at 4-0 right now. Looking through some of them, you have teams like Syracuse, who nobody saw getting off to a 4-0 start. Kansas, who is stunning the nation right now with a 4-0 start. Then you have some teams that are rebuilding, the UWs, the UCLAs that are 4-0, TCU. We decided to go through and pick out the surprise 4-0 team that I think are buying the most into, a team that we think is actually very good. I'll go ahead and start. I've got Minnesota as my team.
Mm-hmm.
I think this team has been legit so far. This defense has been ridiculous. They've allowed, on average, 6 points per game through the first 4 weeks. They've played a soft schedule. I know they beat New Mexico State, Western Illinois, Colorado, and Michigan State. They've dominated all of them, though. You just talked about it. You want a team to dominate. That's what they've done. They've only turned the ball over 3 times on offense, and only one of those was a pick. Interceptions worry me more than fumbles. You're going to fumble the ball sometimes. Twice in 4 games isn't really an issue. 4-6 turnovers, so they're not that big ball hawking squad, but they can make you pay. Muhammad Ibrahim, as running back, he's just going to run you over. This guy is a superstar in the making. He's a beast. Then you also have Tanner Morgan at quarterback, who they're going to rely on the run game. They're going to rely on Ibrahim, but Morgan can beat you as well. If you load that box, he's going to dissect you, pick you apart. That schedule is not very scary either for the rest of the season. This week they're home with Purdue. Then they'll be at Illinois, and then they'll play Penn State, which is their toughest game of the season. That's the only game they have against a ranked team left on the schedule, I believe, because Wisconsin isn't playing well. So this Minnesota team, if they can get by Penn State and not trip up, this team could flirt with a playoff spot. That defense is that good.
I agree. Minnesota has been a very good team this year. I really don't see anybody. There's not a lot of crazy 4-0 teams that are not already up there. I think I'm going to go with Kansas just because I love the hype around Kansas. I think because for I don't know how long Kansas has been always known as the worst team in college football as far as Power 5 goes. Just year after year losing. But I think the hype around Kansas is it's fun, like just a good team to be like just experience, It's almost like when the Cleveland Browns went 0-16 and then Baker comes and they win that game and there's just so much hype and just fun around Cleveland. This is kind of what it feels like with Kansas. Is yes, they're 4-0. They have played virtually, I don't want to say nobody's. They played West Virginia. Played Houston, Duke, and then Tennessee Tech. But I mean, game 1 against Tennessee Tech, 56-10, which is a pretty good, pretty big number. And then obviously beating West Virginia, beating Houston. I think those are solid games for them. I don't see them going to the playoffs or nothing, but I think a successful Kansas season is being ranked in the top 20. And I could very well see that happening, especially with the rest of their schedule they got. I mean, they got to play Oklahoma, which is going to be a tough game. Baylor, Oklahoma State. Both those Oklahoma teams are going to be their 2 toughest games, I think, for the rest of the season.
That Big 12, we talked about it.
Mm-hmm.
They just eat each other alive, it feels like, every single year. It's going to be interesting to see how Kansas handles the tougher games that are coming their way. I think West Virginia is towards the bottom of the Big 12 probably. They did beat them in overtime, but this Kansas offense is what I think is legit. They can score points on anyone. I'm very excited to see if, especially this week, can they beat Iowa State, who's always a stingy defense? We're going to learn a lot about the Jayhawks this week.
Yes, for sure.
That is going to do, though, for this episode of the Kingsmen Sports Podcast. Thank you guys so much for hopping on another week. Again, we will be off next week. We'll have some of our smaller episodes we kind of teased earlier in the podcast that will be coming your way next week. Of course, we'll talk about the MLB playoffs will be the big topic. Plus, we'll have some NFL pick'ems, some NFL recap videos that'll, again, be shorter. Don't forget, though, to go listen to us on Spotify. We are officially on Spotify. We're working hard to get all the previous podcasts up on there. We're making moves. We're growing, and we thank you guys so much for growing along with us. We appreciate it. That'll do, though, for this week's Kingsmen Sports Podcast. We'll see you in 2 weeks for the next full episode here on the Eli Sports Network.